I have an article I was just gonna put up about that. So let me put that up in place of this map now.
Cool.
Have another visual.
We're thinking on the same frequency, man. I like that.
See that?
1 second, let me present it. How massive is this thing, do you think? Well, does it say?
It's a toddler.
Alien.
But
go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you speak of giants, right? But what you have to understand is there's a whole spectrum of creatures that are not necessarily huge, but they can be related to the giants. When the giants they kind of interbreed with us for a few generations, they end up getting smaller. And there were different varieties of them. They had different deformities. Some had multiple rows of teeth, and you can find these descriptions documented in archaeology. And then subsequently, often the Vatican will show up. Like there's a lot of news articles, literally thousands of news articles similar to this from a long time ago, where they're digging up these huge bodies and they'll be describing some of their deformities. So yeah, and also in the Bible, it also describes, in the scripture, it describes sometimes they had 6 fingers. And a lot of the native tribes, they would, when they were depicting these things in America before the conquistadors and whatnot, they would draw them with 6 fingers on their hands as a representation of these creatures. So they're not necessarily giants. It's that these creatures from the other realm that came down and mixed with the original creation, not only people but also animals. You got a result of different hybrids that came out of that, and many of them ended up ruling. I believe most of the time, when you're talking about Scythians or whatever, most societies their royal class ended up being related to these beings, and they would set up their little government systems.
Okay, so yeah, can you? All right, so let's stay on the Slavic. And wow, this article is freaking like recent, man.
Yeah, this just happened.
Holy shit.
There's a lot more of these, like not just toddlers. There's really like robust, large skeletons that have also been. Oh, this is interesting. Read this part here.
Can you read it, please?
It says, yeah, sure. It says the archaeologist group said that such skull deformations were typical for Sarmatians, who once inhabited modern-day Crimea. It's theorized that it may have been used to identify certain groups or bearers of a certain social status. So these were probably the upper class, because they also got special burials. You have burial mounds all over the Crimea, and they were full of gold. And these were the royal class. Like, these were the upper class Scythians.
Okay. So how does this exactly correlate or mix in with our history? I mean, I see how you're presenting it, but how do you think that went down, and around what time? Like if you were to vision it, how would you vision that happening exactly? That's coming from different dimensions. Like, how do you think that happened? Like, as far as we go, as far as the Slavs and the Scythians.
There's a few ideas about that, and I can't say for sure which one, but what I can say for sure is that before the flood, these beings came down to Earth, and what resulted, when you read the Book of Giants from the Dead Sea Scrolls or the Book of Enoch, what resulted was all kinds of strange beings, but principally giants. And then those giants had offspring. Those in that first generation, they had offspring with women, and they got a little smaller. And then that generation had offspring with women, and they got a little bit smaller. So the first generation was monstrous in size, and they got a little bit smaller as they bred down. And then somehow, after the flood, they started to return again. And you see it correlates in every culture that emerged after the flood, every ancient culture. They have a lot of depictions of giants. There's a lot of evidence that giants were creating their architecture in Egypt. I'm thinking right now of Egypt as one example. A lot of the obelisks, they actually have giant handprints on them, that they're like unfinished pieces of Egyptian architecture. For some reason, they didn't finish them, and they're kind of rough, and they're just sitting there, and they have large handprints on them, and they have giant chisel marks and things like that. Evidently, giants got into all these different cultures, and they brought the doctrine of Cain and of the fallen angels, basically the Kabbalah. They brought it over to the other side, and then that religion, that original religion that was from before the flood, where the gods ruled over men and they used these giants to be kings over men, and they basically farmed us for food. That's kind of what we were. After the flood, Babylon, like, we came off the ark, and the whole point of the flood was the creator was trying to wipe out this genetic mess that had taken over the whole earth. That was the point of the flood, right? And so he preserved Noah to be a new start, pure start, a new generation with good DNA. And then eventually, as his sons started multiplying, somehow these giants showed up again, and there are records that indicate some of them hid underground and survived underground. And it's possible that those giants,
there, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, for sure, they're still there, and I believe some of them survived the flood underground. And then there might be other possibilities as well, but that one possibility I think is very likely, that they survived, and then those sons of Noah started again, interacting with these beings and interbreeding with these beings. And then as you had ancient Babylon created under Nimrod, which was the first system, the first, Cain type system after the flood. People had been doing agriculture, living off the land, but then Nimrod created that city all over again, that system all over again. And then it says he became a giant. Nimrod himself somehow messed with his DNA or something, and apparently he became a giant. And then from Babylon, after the Tower of Babel, basically, that's when ancient Egypt was formed, ancient Scythia was formed, all these ancient what do you call them? India was formed, and they took that original religion from Babylon, and there was only one language as well in the beginning. But then after Babylon, people developed different languages, and they went off into these different regions of the earth. They took that religion, and I think they took those, giants that were among them, they went to, and they just reestablished that whole Kabbalistic structure in their respective regions all over again. And that's just cycle just keeps repeating. We as a mass humanity, we don't escape from these beings' control for the most part, most of us.
Okay, so Noah had 3 sons, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so Noah has 3 sons, and let's go, let's say, to Egypt, because if we were to think of pharaohs, Pharisees, or Akhenaten, or Tutankhamun, or the guy that supposedly built the biggest pyramid, who am I thinking about? Not Akhenaten.
Not King Tut. No, Ramses, right?
Ramses the second, right? For the biggest pyramid. Okay, so in your theory and exactly what you think, do you think that giants literally built the pyramids? I'm talking about the biggest ones, like the Giza.
The Egyptian pyramids.
The Giza.
I don't know for sure. I can say that I believe that you see architecture very similar to that all over the world. And then there's a really good example in Peru. I forgot what it's called, and in Bolivia too. I forgot what it's called.
Peru is fuck, not Chichen Itza, but Machu Picchu, right? Um,
Not sure.
yeah, and then in Bolivia, right? In Bolivia, like
Hmm.
even bigger than anything else, right? But the question that I'm trying to ask is, if we were to just stay in Egypt, these pharaohs are depicted as normal size. So now this is where I'm a little confused. Are they?
Well, look at this picture I'm showing you here. Do you see that?
Mhm.
That's a depiction of a pharaoh. And notice he's got like 6 normal-sized men in one hand.
Holy shit, that's what that is. Okay, but I don't remember anywhere it indicating that Akhenaten or Tutankhamun or Ramses that they were giants. Now, are you saying that they were
Mhm.
giants?
Well, let me answer that with another picture because I think this will kind of explain it better than me. But you notice that pattern with the elongated skulls, right? You see that?
You're like cone heads almost.
Yeah, that is a trait from the fallen angels. And you just saw that in Crimea, right? You see the same thing in Peru, and you see it very prominently when you look at depictions of Egyptian rulers. This was considered a mark of nobility, the elongated skull, and this is not a natural skull. Anyone who thinks that
Not at
this
all.
is formed through, because there's a theory that people try to use to um,
Justify that.
yeah, they try to, I don't know what the word is, like debunk the notion that
Mm.
this is something different. They say, well, they used cranial headboarding, and they basically take these children's heads between two boards and tie them between two boards, and then this is how their head ends up.
I don't
And
know
they
about
did do
skull
that.
growing, man. I don't know about the
The,
skull growing like that, man.
yeah, exactly. But they did do that, right? Because the reason why peasants would do that was they were trying to imitate the
Mm.
style of the nobility, but their skulls would never get bigger. They would just be deformed. But
Right.
these skulls that the nobility had, they're like 30% bigger. And they have bones in them that we don't have. They have different anatomy. Sometimes they have 2 rows of teeth. Their spinal cord is different. Like their DNA is different when you look at their anatomy.
Those two bottom pictures, are they actual pictures of skulls?
Yes.
Yo, the freaking question comes up is like, when will we ever see this in textbooks or major media or anything like that? Like, how long are they gonna keep trying to hide this shit, man?
I think that they're gonna soon enough. The theory of evolution will be thrown out by mainstream culture because there's just too much information coming out about contact with other beings. There's videos. There's so much testimony. There's these skulls popping up everywhere. I mean, people are just they're gonna see the writing on the wall. They're gonna have to basically go with an ancient alien type theory soon, in my opinion.
Mhm.
But they're gonna swing that, and they're gonna tell people that they came from aliens, and they're not gonna include God in the picture. They're not gonna talk about fallen angels. They're not gonna talk about those things, but they will kind of admit that evolution is wrong, and there's really no proof for it, and it looks like we were, some of us came from aliens.
Why do you think that the whole alien notion is more plausible and acceptable than, let's say, the giants and ED, extra dimensional beings, and like, why do you think that? Because is it because the Bible theory, is it too like mythological, and then the alien theory is more scientific? Like, how are they? You know what I mean? How are they gonna swing this? Like, why would that be more plausible?
um I would say just the word alien isn't really inaccurate, but the way they present the topic, like that these are beings from other planets and they've been around for
Mm.
millions of years and they created us, and these sorts of concepts, those are false. But not necessarily the word alien. And I would say people find it more plausible, in my opinion, just because of cultural programming through the media. And I
Mhm.
mean, all the sci-fi and the
Right.
alien themed movies and video games, it's just put that theme in people's minds, so that's what they're more inclined to believe. But when you look at primary sources like firsthand witnesses, the ancient history, the scriptures, they all paint a totally different picture. That this is, you're talking about things coming from other realms altogether.
Do you think the elite would rather want us to think the alien version as opposed to the extra dimensional or other realm version?
Yeah, yeah, because then they don't have to, you know, they can keep people deceived, right? People will be content with a little bit of truth, and they're, you know, they'll slip in a deception, and then that will turn everyone back towards the system again. And you know, there'll be a whole new quote unquote scientific concept about aliens, and they'll throw out evolution, and they'll be like, oh well, you know, we were wrong about evolution, but trust us this time, you know.
Okay.